One thing I would say, Brian,
Yeah.
is when you talk about going soft, I think it's important to look at the corporate media and how it has gone soft on what matters to millions of Americans. I like to say that too often the mainstream corporate media gives us a downsized politics of excluded alternatives. What do I mean?
Downsized? What do you mean?
Downsized. Bernie Sanders speaks for millions of Americans in this country. The issues he speaks to are tapping into anxieties, passions about where this country is heading, issues that are in essence mainstream, but for too long the corporate media has written them off as marginal. Bernie Sanders has been in Congress since 1990. He was on Meet the Press for the first time last year.
Let's think
John
about that.
McCain
Wait, last year.
sleeps at Meet the Press. but also...
But why do you think that is? Why is it that Sanders wasn't on Meet the Press, for
example? Because there is a
example?
policing of the parameters of what is considered acceptable politics in this country. The gatekeepers too often will say, well, debt-free higher education, defense cuts to the defense budget, tax hikes for the very wealthy. Even the New York Times last month had a story about how those issues might make Bernie Sanders unelectable. Why? Majorities of Americans are in sync with him on this issue. So I think, listen, we need strong coverage. On Monday, The Nation has a piece about Bernie Sanders' stance on gun control. Hillary Clinton is teeing that up as an issue in this election. There are tough questions, and I don't think fairness means being uncritical, but I would submit that the corporate media has been unfair to the people of this country for too long by not giving them the full range of views that this country deserves to hear. And that's what I mean by a downsized politics of excluded alternatives.
So is it that Bernie Sanders is now a presidential candidate? He's being taken much more seriously than he was, you're saying, for decades.
You know, Brian, millions of people are meeting Bernie Sanders for the first time. The Nation has been covering him for close on to 30 years. But you read about a woman who's gone to a Bernie Sanders rally, and she says, wow, I never knew people were talking about these issues. It's almost like a lifeline for people who felt they were alone.
Well, we're showing these crowds. You know, that crowd he had, what, 10 days ago, very big crowd, got a lot of attention in the press.
Now, is he he's an insurgent candidate, but he is speaking about solutions. He's speaking about ideas that this country's hungry for. And the gatekeepers, Brian, I have to say, you know, the idea that it's only 2 months out, right? So his name recognition, the media will play a big role. Will they give him the space, and not just as a foil to Hillary Clinton? Will they keep saying he's unelectable? Or will they give him and his issues the space? Because too often, as you well know, campaigns in this country are covered as a horse race. And the issues which Bernie Sanders wants to talk about desperately, running a serious campaign, talking about serious solutions, can that be heard in our system? Because to me, the measure of democracy is whether our elections become debates, vibrant debates, and whether campaigns lift up new ideas that people want to hear.
Does the nation sort of attach itself to Sanders, try to grow with him as he grows in the polls?
Listen, we have, John Nichols did a terrific piece about Martin O'Malley's proposal to restructure Puerto Rico's debt. Katha Pollitt, our columnist, had a terrific column about why she's excited in supporting Hillary Clinton. We're interested.
So you're saying you're running the gamut there.
We're interested in hearing what Hillary Clinton has to say tomorrow with her economic speech.
That'll be big.
But I do think Bernie Sanders speaks also to the prospects for progressive politics in this country. It is an opening. When you have a pope traveling Latin America talking about unfettered capitalism, perhaps we're at a moment where people are looking beyond labels. Bernie Sanders is essentially, by the way, a 21st century New Dealer, all this socialism. He's essentially modernizing the New Deal. But people, I think, are hungry, Brian, not for opposition ads. And, you know, at the end of the day, the airwaves, this may be shocking and heretical, though Bernie Sanders talks about it, as do others, the airwaves belong to the American people. We don't need the saturation of these warped attack ads. We need issues, we need discussion, we need debate.
You're talking about the broadcast networks, the local stations where there's so much money funneled in from campaigns.
Yeah, why are our campaigns so brutally expensive? That's something Bernie Sanders, by the way.
And I'm sure he will be talking more about that.
Media also measure candidates by their fundraising. That becomes a metric, which I think is not a healthy sign.
It's actually a metric helping him right now.
He did far better than Cruz and Rand Paul. 24 hours after he launched his campaign, he raised $1.5 million from small donors, which speaks again to people. I've heard something, I want to hear more. So I think the nation will be covering the full gamut. That's been our role, and we want to lift up ideas though that we've been covering for decades, and now they're out there because they're mainstream. What was once considered is now mainstream, and I don't think a lot of people, with all due respect, in the mainstream corporate media have fully woken up to it, though there are some hard-boiled correspondents like Dana Milbank and Dan Baltz who are saying, hey, this may be a moment. What's going on here? And trying to check the barometer, the thermometer of this country, a populist, economic populist ferment.